Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for being here today. As we prepare to head into town meeting week, roughly halfway through the session, I want to remind everyone of the priorities we laid out in January: public safety, housing, and affordability. As I said in the State of the State, these are issues that are affecting Vermonters every day. So we have an obligation to prioritize them for the people we serve. At the same time, they're each essential to making sure we can keep and attract the workers and families we need to reverse our demographic trends and address so many other challenges we face. Over the last few weeks, I've shared my concerns about the lack of focus on housing and public safety. And when it comes to affordability, unfortunately, I'm forced to play a little defense. As I said in my budget address, I didn't believe there would be much criticism for what I asked lawmakers to fund. It was what wasn't in the budget that I knew would draw some criticism. But we're in a different fiscal reality today than many lawmakers and advocates have been accustomed to over the last few years. The simple truth is, we just can't do everything we want this year. We have to separate want from need, and we have to be realistic, which means we have to prioritize, and that's what my budget does. And prioritizing is about more than what you fund and what you don't. It's about looking across the entire field, understanding the challenges and how they work together, and making strategic investments that give you the biggest bang for the buck. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear we're all on the same page here in the building. That's not unusual, but it's prevalent today. And I realize many of the bills that have money attached, need to go through appropriations. So there is that filter. But many committees are talking about new initiatives, adding a few million here and quite a few million there, without a plan for what they're going to cut or what new taxes they'll force on Vermonters to pay. Because that's the reality. Anything more than what I proposed will have to come from some other initiative or require more revenue. So if they think I'm underfunding something, they should tell us how they're intending to fund more and to do more. There's nothing easier in politics than to claim we need to do more of something without having to articulate the trade-off, because there's always a trade-off. This year, more than ever, we have to live within our means and work to drive down costs for Vermonters. Just think about it. Vermont already had a high cost of living before the pandemic. Then came years of inflation and higher health care and utility costs. On top of that, as a result of bills passed by this legislature over my vetoes, Vermonters now pay 20% more for their license and registration at the DMV. In July, they'll be paying $100 million payroll tax. And next year, they'll be burdened with a clean heat standard, which could cost people hundreds, if not thousands more a year to heat their homes and businesses. And then there's the looming $200 million property tax disaster that I've warned about for years. It should be clear by now that Vermonters can't afford for us to pile anything more on them, which is why we need to be disciplined. Legislators shouldn't be overpromising without a plan or underfunding new ideas, which will force Vermonters to pay for later. We also have to reject costly new initiatives that will push people further behind, like this new renewable energy standard the House is working on, which could cost Vermonters $1 billion. $1 billion over the next 10 years. And this is a difficult pill to swallow because our Department of Public Service developed a less expensive plan that still achieves our environmental goals. So I want to remind taxpayers, I will continue to have your back and advocate for fiscal discipline, while also making smart investments that will help us over the long run. So I'm asking you to call your legislators and tell them you've had enough. Your voice matters, so please use it. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Governor When you cite this $1 billion number, can you or maybe TJ talk a little bit about how you arrived at this number? I speak with
It's a JFO number. We're using their data.
utilities that I've spoken with have said it's impossible to look that far out of what some of the cost pressures will be, what it will mean for rates.
So what's their number?
Well, they don't have it yet.
So they're proposing something without a number? JFO has come up with a number. I mean, we have used them in the past and utilized their data, someplace to start. I realize they've said it could be more, it could be less. We just don't know, but you have to start somewhere. So the $1 billion is something to react to, and if it's less, then I think the utilities, who had a lot of input into the bill, should tell us what it is. TJ, you want to comment further? Come on in.
Sure. TJ Poor, Director of Regulated Utility Planning, Public Service Department. And I think the governor hit it well. Our number, back up a second and say that we went through an 18-month stakeholder engagement process that, pursuant to Act 154 of 2022, the Environmental Justice Law, which really tried to get a sense of Vermonters' priorities when they think about their electricity supply. And the results of that came up with Vermonters' priorities were, number one, affordability, also emissions, also reliability, and community access to solar. And the Public Service Department's proposal really best balances those objectives, which are sometimes in competition with one another, where we get to, as accounted for by the Global Warming Solutions Act, zero emissions from the electric sector by 2030. That's faster than what H289, the Renewable Energy Standard proposal, is. And there are costs to both the department's proposal and H289. They come from both the potential risk of causing additional transmission investment and then additional power supply costs, the cost of energy. And those are kind of the two main components of where that $1 billion comes from. But really, the department's proposal is a more reasonable and gradual pace of deployment that doesn't impose the risk of such high costs to Vermonters.
To follow, how much of that is made from in-state renewables versus Hydro-Quebec or others?
How much
of the Public Service Department's plan would be sourced from in-state renewables?
So the Public Service Department's plan calls for 15% new renewable energy from connected to the Vermont distribution grid by 2035.
I was talking to Representative Jonathan Williams today, and he shared the story of racing back home from the State House last night. So we could go to City Council and tell them about the flood aid that the Budget Adjustment Conference Committee had signed on just minutes prior. It's going to be $1 million or so for Barry. That's part of a block grant program that he would advise the legislature not to adopt. He said there was applause. He said some people started crying. Just an extraordinary sense of relief. And I'm wondering, when you talk about the difference between wants and needs, Representative Williams would argue this is a need that Barry has right now.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering for you, how do you differentiate between what people need and what people want?
Well, again, these aren't easy decisions to make. And when you have a finite amount of money that you can't exceed, from my standpoint, then you have to make choices. Now, these choices could be, we could make these choices in the big bill that we'll be talking about more. But everything that we took out of budget adjustment, the added costs, it's got to come out of something. So there are going to have to be decisions made in the big bill about what we do without. So look forward to those discussions. I think, again, the legislature is doing what they can to balance the want and need. But we felt at this point in time that this wasn't this wasn't something that we would fund, and we would take a look at it in the big bill. But it's in the budget, the BAA now, and we'll live with it, and we'll go from here. But somebody's going to have to determine where that money comes from.
There's a number of things in BAA that you don't want to be in there, but it sounds like you're okay.
Yeah, I would say they followed the Senate version, which was more palatable from my perspective. And for the most part, we haven't looked at every detail of the BAA and what they came up with. But for the most part, if there's no poison pills in there that we can see, and I'll probably sign it if there aren't anything that evolves. So.
And what level of concern do you have about continuing the motel housing program until June 30th with this expanded cohort that we have to?
Well, if we're successful, and we're having a huge amount of success in negotiating with the hotel owners at this point in time, which is great news. But if we can get to that point where we can afford it, then we'll be in a good position. But we're making tremendous gains right now.
I'm hearing, at least from folks in Burlington, that some of the negotiations, the $80 a night for hotel rooms, some hotels in Chittenden County won't go for that. Are you hearing the same?
Well, we heard that early on, but we've been, again, making a lot of progress, and I want to thank the hotels and motels who've been working with us to accomplish this. And again, the closer we got to reality that this cap was going to be in place in the BAA, the more agreements we had. And I expect we'll have a few more over the next couple of days. So I feel as good as I can feel at this point in time, and but it's a positive step.
I guess more broadly, where do we stand with some of the shelter proposals that your administration has put forward, whether that be at the Armory Berry or other communities? I don't know if there's anybody.
Well, that's one of the problematic pieces maybe of the BAA. There was about $4 million for emergency shelters that we had put into that. They took half of that, and VHCB has that. And I haven't heard what their proposal is, but I hope that VHCB is able to put that plan into place, and that we'll have some emergency sheltering for the next 6 months, because that's what we need. So if they're just replacing what we were going to do, great news. But I'm concerned about that. And I haven't seen the plan from VHCB to be perfectly clear. I don't know if you've heard anything, anybody else.
How you can go on your school budget?
I received a pamphlet in the mail saying that our taxes in Berlin would go up $459 per 100,000. So that's going to be, for someone with a $200,000 home, that's going to be about $1,000 increase. So that's substantial. But to be perfectly fair, I haven't done my homework yet. I haven't looked at their proposal, which I intend to do this weekend. There is a meeting on Saturday. I'm not sure that I'm going to go, but I'll get the materials and at least take a look before I make my decision on Tuesday.
You leaning one way or the other?
It's a significant increase. So, I mean, I would have to say that I'm leaning towards voting against it. But I want to be fair, and I want to read the information first.
S18, the flavored tobacco ban, set at the House floor. You've said in the past that we think there's other priorities. It would be something you would potentially sign, but you've also mentioned all the tight revenues, and JFO predicts up to $14 million lost in total revenue. Will that play a role at all if that doesn't fit in your desk?
Well, a couple of things. When it was first presented, I believe, and this was what I had understood, that it was a menthol ban only. And I said I was ambivalent about that. I don't think it's going to help anything. I don't think it's going to prevent people from smoking myself. We already have flavored alcohol. We have flavored cannabis. We have flavored everything to entice people to use their products that probably aren't good for them. I'm not a smoker. I don't feel strongly about keeping menthol or banning it. So I was ambivalent about that. but they've added a couple of things to the bill that I wasn't aware of in the beginning. And it's about the snuff, or whatever term you use for that, and the significant dollars that will be lost because of it. And if they're just going to go across the river and buy it, go into another state and buy it, then we're putting our economy at risk in some respects. So we'll see what happens with it. It's still in the early stages. It hasn't passed the House at this point. It still has to go to the Senate, I believe, or the other way around. Senate first, and then go to the House, and we'll see where it goes from there.
The Senate today is going to vote on a bill to prohibit unserialized ghost guns, so guns that are printed or assembled from parts. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I'm growing a little weary of some of the gun bills, but this one seems to make some sense. Putting a serial number on a gun that is produced at home seems to make sense, but the devil's always in the details. I'm not sure whether there's fees associated with that. I've heard about a 3-day waiting period. I'm not sure I understand that either, and I don't know how the gun dealers are going to do this, whether there's a machinery that is utilized to put this actual serial number on. I just don't know the intricacies of that. So I have concerns about it, but in principle, I'm not opposed to it. It's just the details that may be problematic.
We're still hearing from some folks that are having to pay out of pocket for maintenance drugs, but also just for other prescriptions, people on Medicaid that were affected by the Change Healthcare hack. Is the state going to be doing anything to actively reimburse or reach out to people that have had to pay out of pocket?
This is something that maybe I would let Todd answer, if he would.
Certainly. Thanks, Governor. Todd Delos, Deputy Secretary of the Agency of Human Services. We're actively working with Change Healthcare. They're bringing a pharmacist on site to help work with pharmacies that would normally reach out through their online platform to provide additional supports. We certainly intend to follow up on concerns that consumers have if they're required to pay out of pocket. We're also working closely with the Agency of Digital Services to really understand the scope and scale and the impact of this challenge.
Do we have any sense of whether patient data has been compromised?
We haven't heard that any Vermont data has been compromised at this point.
And just so I'm clear, so you guys will be reaching out to pharmacies, which will then connect with patients, or how will people know?
My understanding, I can follow up with the Department of Vermont Health Access to get you a little more information on this, but my understanding is that it is someone on site here in Vermont who would be available for pharmacies to call. Thanks.
Governor, we've seen a state's attorney and a legislator arrested for DUI. Your Department of Health Emergency Services chief suspended under investigation for some sort of drinking incident. Do you see this as signs of added stress public officials are under, and if so, what's causing it and what can be done about it?
Well, I think everyone has to adhere to the law, obviously, and understanding the effects of driving while impaired are known to most everyone. And so it's unfortunate in these situations that they happened because I think people are educated enough to not engage in that when they've had too much to drink. They shouldn't drive. So we see this time and time again. It doesn't seem to matter, who you are, what socioeconomic background you might have, or what title you hold. It still happens, unfortunately. But I'm hoping that these are just one-offs and this isn't a pattern.
This Sunday, presidential candidate Nikki Haley is going to be in South Burlington. You've endorsed her in the past, the Republican primary. I guess first, do you plan on going? And two, are you hoping to maybe see as an open primary state, Democrats and independents picking Republicans to vote Nikki Haley? You also talked about your displeasure with former President Trump.
Yeah. Yes, I'm planning to go on Sunday. I've said early on that I'll do anything I can to prevent what I see happening, which is for former President Trump to to receive the nomination. And then we have a repeat of 4 years ago, which I don't think is healthy for the country. We see so much division, so much polarization, and I look for candidates that can actually govern rather than resort to, other methods that are just unhealthy for our democracy. And so I will be advocating for people to go on Sunday, but I also will be advocating for those independents and maybe right-leaning Democrats or anyone who would pick up a ballot to cast their vote. That would be helpful to at least send the message that we're tired of this, they're tired of it, seeing it throughout the country. We talked a lot about this at the National Governors Association meeting that I was at, and it's just concerning in terms of what Americans think. Frank Luntz was there. He's a pollster, been highly regarded over the last 30, 35 years. And he had some alarming data that tells us we're just going in the wrong direction as a country. And the people are fearful about the future. And the division is just growing much, much greater. And I don't see that President Trump in 2024 is going to fix that. It's going to make it worse, I think.
Governor, do you have any thoughts on the Sergeant at Arms upcoming retirement and who might be elected to fill that role?
And I'm sorry, what was the second part to that?
And who might be elected to fill that?
There's two candidates that I know, and I think both are very capable. I've known of them. I don't know them well, but I know of them. It's a significant position. Janet has done a great job here over the last number of years. I knew her when I was in the Senate. She was in Legislative Council. So I think it just takes a person that has the right attitude, understands the position they're in, and what we're trying to accomplish here in the state with this beautiful state house. So I think either would be capable.
We're one of a handful, I think, of state houses that don't really have metal detectors or, you can just walk right in, right? It's the people's house. How do you balance that access versus, security threats on public officials and that conversation?
It's a tough balance, admittedly, but very proud of the fact that we have an open building there that anyone can walk into any committee room and listen, actively engage in democracy and hear what legislators are thinking and hearing and seeing for themselves as they walk through the building who their representatives are and how they can engage with them. I think that's healthy. And as well, I mean, I remember seeing school kids on cold mornings when I was in the Senate come through the building, either in the afternoon or in the morning on the way to school. So it's just kind of nice to be able to have that here in Vermont. Now, I know things have changed a bit, and we have to be aware of that. But at this point in time, I'm hopeful we can keep this building as open as possible because it is the people's house.
Got a couple folks on the phones, then we'll come back to the room. We'll start with Keith, Rotten Herald.
Hi, this is also about the hotel program. I was talking to some people today, and the scenario they painted to me was that the state has to negotiate these caps with a lot of these hotel providers, but they've only got 2 days to do it. Some people were thinking that's just not going to happen. So is that anyone else's understanding? Was I misled, or is that what's going on? And if that is the case, like what's being done to prevent a bunch of people being put on the street?
Yeah, Keith, we've been actually engaged in these negotiations for quite some time, and it's been a little slow to begin with because most of the hotel motel owners have I think taken advantage of the program and actually profited quite significantly by this program because some of them were charging anywhere from $100 to $150 a night, which is and filling their hotels. So Those days are over. We're have this cap in place at this point in time. We've been negotiating. They didn't quite believe that it was going to happen, but the legislature did keep that in place, which we're grateful for, and now it's a reality. So some of these hotel and motel owners have come around in the last 24 to 48 hours, and we expect more to come in the next 24 hours. So we're very, very encouraged by what we're seeing. We have contingency plans if it doesn't, but what we're seeing right now is actually good news.
Thank you. You mentioned you had contingency plans if this doesn't go well. Do you have any details on what those are?
I have details. We have a number of contingency plans depending on the number of people who aren't going to be housed in the hotel motel program. Again, I don't want to go into those details because I think that would be disinformation on some levels, because we don't know what the number is actually is, but we are well over 2/3, 3/4 of the way there. So and it's gaining every hour. And there's still a couple of big players that we're negotiating with that could, seal the deal, and we wouldn't see much impact at all.
So that $80 cap, that is in place. That's happening.
It is.
That's locked in.
Right. That's in the budget adjustment that was passed out of the conference committee last night. Now, it hasn't been endorsed by the House and the Senate. They'll have their say in this as well, the bodies. But I anticipate that, and I don't want to speak for the legislature, but I anticipate that it will pass through those two bodies and then come to me for signature. And as I said earlier, if there's nothing visible that we've seen that's any poison pills in there that we couldn't live with, and so I anticipate that we'll be able to, that I'll sign it sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
Tim McQuiston, Vermont Business Magazine.
Hey, Governor, this morning Senator Sanders was holding a hearing on a new report on retirement plans and savings plans and the demise of pension plans in particular, which of course he supports. How is Vermont doing right now and the plan you have in place, the uptake on that, and how you see generally the retirement plans going here?
Well, in general, I still see that we're underfunding our pensions, and that's going to continue to be a problem over the next decade or two. I don't see this problem getting any better. It may even get worse. So, as you remember, I vetoed the bill. Didn't get a single vote from the legislature in support of that veto. But I had to, from my standpoint, on principle, because I didn't think it was enough, and I continue to believe that. So we'll see who's right on this eventually. We do have the volunteer paid family leave program, if that's what you're talking about, that we've put into place, and that so far it's been confined to the state employees, but it opened back up now to businesses, and we're looking forward to businesses signing up. So more on that in the coming months.
So, as far as a state pension plan, teacher's pension plan, do you see any movement now? There's such a cash crunch right now in the budget. Do you think anything will come forward in the next, not this year perhaps, but in the next couple of years, if there'll be some motivation?
I think you'll have to ask the legislative branch about that.
But that would be something obviously to be supportive of, trying to pay that down.
Absolutely. But again, we have to live within our means.
Thank you, Governor.
Ed Barber, Newport Daily Express.
Good afternoon, Governor. Can you hear me?
We can.
Hopefully for once you can. Well, what I'd like to talk about today is a subject I broached a year ago, and that involves our Casella landfill. And the company, 2 years ago, they bought a local hauler, and at the time I was paying $9 a month for a once-a-month pickup. A year later, they raised that amount to $22, and just recently they raised it to $33. So it's gone up $24 a month in the span of 2 years. While Casella is not necessarily a monopoly, it covers a large area of the state and has the only landfill. I consider them much different than an electric utility, which has its own territory. So you're in Green Mountain Power territory, you can't call Vermont Electric Co-op and to see if they can give you service here. My question is, considering these drastic rate increases, would your administration consider working with the legislature to consider whether or not their rates should be regulated like electric utilities are and regulated before the Public Utility Commission?
Again, Ed, we're seeing inflation and rising prices across the state in all different areas. And I would assume in the trash hauling business, they're not immune to that. We have a number of players in the state, but admittedly, Casella is the biggest and the only landfill of any significance here in the state. And that's, again, I'm concerned about the future, where the next one will be sited, where the competition will be. And I'm not sure, I was talking to my counterpart in New Hampshire, and they're having the same concerns about where they're going to be able to site any new facilities in New Hampshire and what that's going to do to rates and so forth. So I don't know if that's the right path forward, but it is on my radar in terms of overall costs to Vermonters in every category. We're just seeing rising costs. But we as the executive branch, the legislative branch as well, have a role to play in making sure that we're not impacting Vermonters more. That's why I keep talking about not raising taxes and fees. It's the least we can do when they have to endure so much with other rising costs. So the 20% increase in DMV fees has an effect. That has a ripple effect. That actually affects those same rates that you were talking about. Everything we do in this building will have a ripple effect across businesses. If we have any increase, will have to be supported by businesses raising their prices. So again, that's why it's so important for us to live within our means and not raise taxes and fees any more than we have to.
Very good. Thank you very much, Governor. Have a good day.
You too.
Tom Davis, Compass Vermont. All right, back to the room.
Governor, there's a constitutional amendment being floated affirming the right to organize unions. How do you feel about that?
I haven't seen that one. No, I haven't.
The House Agriculture Committee advanced a ban on neonicotinoid pesticides. I'm wondering if you had seen this bill or your agriculture.
I know Anson his team has been actively pursuing that.
Thank you, Governor. So this has been, I think, the main focus of the House Ag Committee over the last few weeks, and it's a complicated issue. So what they're proposing is these are called treated seeds. The legislature a couple years ago put together a program, and they chartered the Ag Innovation Board, and they said, Ag Innovation Board, they created it. You go study this issue, and come back to the legislature with a solution. So they did that, and they've spent weeks, months studying this issue. And the Ag Innovation Board, which is an independent board we have a role in it, recommended that we need to do some more research on this particular issue. We also need to include a proposal to include more pollinator habitat was another recommendation. Because the issue is there's a lot of discussion that there's no alternative to these seeds. And we're talking mainly corn seed, but there are also, in the produce world, there's also seeds that are used that are treated with a pesticide. So right now, we think this bill needs a lot of improvement, and we're hopeful that over time we can get to a better place. It's important that we support the pollinator world. The beekeepers are wonderful. They've played a role for decades and centuries in supporting Vermont agriculture, and they play a vital role with that. And I would encourage all of those out there not to try to divide a particular group of farmers versus another group of farmers. And you can see that kind of that tone out there. We have so many out there that need this seed. So the bottom line is we want more research. We believe UVM is a great place to do that. Dr. Heather Darby is working on it. So we just need some more time to figure this out before we go for the straight ban. And the other component of the bill transfers a lot of the authority to the Agency of Natural Resources. It could have changed by now. This is the one I did see. And they don't have anything to do with pesticides up there right now. So they'd have to create a program, and then they don't regulate agriculture. So there's a few parts of the bill. We're engaged trying to make it better. The farm community is paying attention to this because it's going to, you talk about affordability. If there is an alternative for a seed, what's it going to cost? Where are they going to get it? So it's one of those issues that we just need a little bit more time to figure this out.
Maybe this is a question for the governor. When we talk about more time, more work, is that something that can happen this session, or could this end in a veto?
I don't do vetoes.
Well, I do. We'll just have to see. Again, I think the legislature can do anything they set their mind to. If they really want something to pass, obviously they have the power to do so. And even if I veto, as they've proven time and time again, they have the supermajority and they can override it. So we'll see what happens with this bill. We would advocate that they take their time and make sure it's right.
Governor, the Senate is going to vote on third reading today on S-278, which would stop the consideration of contributory negligence in sexual assault cases in civil court. Have you reviewed the bill yet? Do you have thoughts on it?
I haven't, but I'm sure Jay, have you, Jay? Yeah. We'll wait.
Thanks, sorry.
That's all right.
Well, I'll wing it.
And I'll do the same.
So Rob Roper wrote recently that the House Education Department has sort of lost its zeal for funding PCB removal in schools, and mostly because of the money problem. And do you see that also, and does that concern you?
I just want to remind everyone, this was, although this is extremely important to our Agency of Natural Resources, our Vermont Department of Health. So Dr. Levine and Secretary Moore are invested in this because they've been putting this into practice. Having said that, we weren't the ones who promoted it. We weren't the ones who started it. It was the legislative action that developed this program. I've always been worried about the costs and where it was going to come from and how we're going to provide for the remediation. But it's here, and so we were dealing with it. I think it's unfortunate to stop the program midstream because I don't feel it's fair to the people that are already impacted. The districts and the schools are impacted. And then we put our heads in the sand about the rest. That doesn't make any sense to me. So again, this wasn't our idea. This was the legislative action that put us in the position we're in today. But I feel as though we need to see it through some way, somehow.
Is there any update on your guys' process for a permanent Secretary of Education?
There is progress on that.
Can you elaborate a little?
Again, this is an important position. We have interviewed all the candidates, and we're getting down there and making sure that we make the right choice. They're all good candidates.
How many candidates?
Am I allowed to say that?
Oh, yes, you can say that.
Yeah, we have 3 that we've interviewed.
Are they based in the state?
That's right now, it's a hiring decision.
Any timeline as to when you might make a choice?
As soon as possible.
PT Digger reported last week that Agency of Natural Resources and Agency of Education both testified in favor of pausing the PCB program.
I don't know if that was an accurate. I don't know. Julie's on now, but I think it would have been her preference to just keep moving forward and maybe slowing it down a bit to allow for us to continue the program. So I don't know if a pause is what they wanted, or just a slowdown and making sure that we had the funding so we could keep moving forward. Secretary Moore.
Yes, Governor, that is exactly correct. What we were proposing was to retool the program to have the pace of testing match the available resources, and also looking to work with the legislature to identify an approach to finishing the work as you described. We believe we have sufficient resources to continue testing through the end of fiscal year 25 with the passage of the Budget Adjustment Act. And that gives time for the conversation about how to complete the work that's been started.
Thank you all.